Welcome to week 14, ACT math practice problems. Question 1 says point P, which is located at 6, -4, translates to P prime, which is located at 3, 0, which represents the translation of P to P prime. All right, so we know we're starting at this location 6, -4, and we're going to the location 3, 0. So basically, how are we changing the X and how are we changing the Y? It looks like we took away 3 on X and we added 4 on Y, right? From -4 to 0 is +4. So basically the transformation is going to look like this. Any coordinate X, Y is going to go to that same coordinate, except we're going to take away 3 from the X and we're going to add 4 from the Y. So this is the part that we're looking for, X minus 3, Y plus 4, and X minus 3, Y plus 4 is choice D, okay? Taking away 3 from the X and adding 4 to the Y. Just remember what that looks like. We've got a figure. We're going to go left 3 and up 4. So now this location will be here. Every point goes left 3, up 4, left 3, up 4. This whole thing slides into that new location. All right, next question says, what is the equation of a line that passes through 6, -12 and has a y-intercept of 8? Okay, so it goes through the point 6, -12. So I can kind of graph that here, 6, -12, and has a y-intercept of 8. So here's a y-intercept of 8. Remember, that means it's at 0, 8. So here's the line that goes through those 2 points, and we want to know the equation. All right, so a couple things. I know B is 8 because that's the y-intercept. They actually give that to me without being very specific. They just tell me that B is 8. It says the y-intercept is 8. So then we've got another point. So remember, when we know a point and we know the y-intercept, we always find the slope first. So the slope is the rise over the run. Now I've already drawn a picture here, so I can kind of tell I go from -12 all the way up to 8. So that's 12 and 8, that's 20 on rise. And then since my run is left, it's going to be negative. So 20 is the rise, and the run is going to be, well, I start at 6, right? And then I go over to 0. So my run is going to be -6, right? So if I'm talking rise over run, I'm saying 20 over -6. That's -10/3. Okay? And then my y-intercept is 8. So I can write the equation right now. I can say y is equal to -10/3 x plus 8. Now that's my equation. Problem is, when I look at all my answer choices, they're all in general form, right, where everything is on one side. That's okay. So all I have to do is add the 10/3 x over onto both sides. So what is y plus 10/3 x? Well, it's 10/3 x plus y. There's no way to really add those. Then I'm going to move my 8 over by subtracting 8 from both sides. So that leaves a -8 on the left and a 0 on the right side. All right. Now, again, I'm looking at my choices, and there's nothing quite matching yet. It's because of this third right here. See, I've got this dividing by 3. I have to undo that. I'm not allowed to have any sort of fractions in general form. So all I do is I basically multiply every single term in here by 3. I'm going to distribute a 3 to everything. So when 3 multiplies by 10/3, what happens is the third cancels with 3. So 3 times 10/3 is just 10. Okay, 10x. Again, just multiply 3 times 10, you get 30, and 30/3 is 10, right? So you can see how 30/3 reduces, or you can just think of it as canceling. But anyway, I distribute it to all parts. So the y gets the 3, the 8 gets the 3, and the 0 gets the 3, and we're left with our general form of our linear function, 10x plus 3y minus 24 equals 0. That, of course, is going to be answer choice C. So answer choice C is correct. All right, the figure below shows a triangle ABC. A prime, B prime, C prime is the image of the triangle after rotation. If the triangle is rotated 90 degrees clockwise, what is the slope of the line segment A prime, B prime? All right, so imagine if I rotate this 90 degrees, right? I've got this point here. If I rotate it 90 degrees, it actually ends up looking like this. Okay, now if you can kind of visualize that in your head, then you can realize what this point is. Because really, you need to know A prime and B prime. And since A was at the origin, when it rotates, it just stays where it's at. And when B rotates, it rotates 90 degrees all the way around to this other side. You got to know the location of B prime. So remember what we said is that a clockwise rotation, remember the seconds on a clock, so you switch the x and the y to -3, 6, and then you change the second number. So -6 will be the y value. We flip them, and then we change the second one's sign, remember, because the clock's on a second. Okay, so this is the location of the new point. So it's down here at -3, -6, and we want to know the slope from A to B. A prime to B prime. So remember, it's y2, that's -6, minus 0, divided by x2 minus x1. Remember, this is coming from A prime is at 0, 0, and B is this. I'm just doing y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So we get -6 over -3, which reduces to +2. So the slope of this line is D, +2. All right, question 4. If a line has slope of -2 and goes through the point 6, 4, which of the following points is on the line? Okay, so there's actually a couple ways to do this. I'm going to do it the traditional way first. I'm going to realize that I have the slope of -2 and I have an x and y coordinate, so I can find the equation of the line. I either do y equals mx plus b, or I do y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. Either of these will work. If I do this, y equals mx plus b, I'm solving for b. The y value equals the slope times the x value plus b. That tells me that 4 is equal to -12 plus b. When I add 12 to both sides, I get that b is equal to 16. Then I write the equation. Y equals -2x plus 16. Remember, I'm writing -2 for the slope right here. And then I'm writing whatever b is that I calculated here as b. Remember, x and y stay as variables. So there's my equation. Now that's not the end. I've got to do some more stuff, but I just wanted to walk through the first part. Now if I use my other equation, it's y minus the y value, which is 4, equals m, the slope, times x minus the x value, which is 6. Again, I'm using x and y for my coordinate. Distribute here, I get -2x plus 12 equals y minus 4. When I solve for y, I add 4 to both sides. I get the equation y equals -2x plus 16. Same thing you get on both sides, okay? So it doesn't matter which way you do it, you're going to get the equation of the line. So now I've got the line. I want to know which of these following points is on the line. Well, what does it mean to be on the line? It means when you plug in the x and y, the equation reads something true, okay? So let's try 0, -1. When I plug in 0 for x and -1 for y, I get that -1 equals 0 plus 16. Is it true that -1 equals 0 plus 16? No, that's not true, which means that point is not on the line. Okay, just for space sake, I'm going to pop over to the next equation here. When x is 4, the y value is 8, right? What I'm doing is I'm testing this point 4, 8 into my equation. So y is 8 equals -2 times 4 plus 16. I get 8 is equal to -8 plus 16. That means that 8 is equal to 8, which is true. So yes, the point 4, 8 is on the line y equals -2x plus 16. Okay, so that's how I know the answer. Now, alternately, I'm going to kind of throw out a different way to do this problem. Okay, what I want to show you is that you could graph this thing. You know that the point 6, 4 is on the graph. That's right here. And you know the slope is -2. Remember, what does slope -2 mean? It rises -2 and runs 1, or it rises 2 and runs -1. Remember, either of those are equal to -2. So what I'm saying is I want to go to the left because I want to find out where this point is here. And I know that -2 means that I should rise either -2 and run 1, rise -2, run 1, or rise 2 and run -1. So actually, either way works, but this gives me the line here. So I can kind of look at this. 0, -1 is down here. Okay, that's not on the line. 4, 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Looks like it might be. I'm not 100% sure. 1, 3, I can definitely tell isn't. 5, 0, I can tell is not. And 12, -2. Now that one looks like it might work. But again, that narrows it down at least to 2 that I can test and see which one works. Okay. All right, what is the equation of a horizontal line that has a y-intercept of 6? All right, so if we remember from what we learned in the lesson, horizon, right? The horizon is a horizontal line, and it's always y equals a number. So basically, it could be a, even though it shouldn't have an x in it. It's not going to be b or c or d. It's, excuse me, not e. It's going to be d. But we can really reason through this horizontal line through 6 here. Notice how all the points have something in common. This is -4, 6. This is 0, 6. This is 10, 6, etc. All the y numbers are 6, so it has to be that. Also, remember, this is a horizontal line. The slope is 0 of a horizontal line. So when we write it as y equals mx plus b, we know that the m is 0 and the b is 6. So y equals 0x plus 6, and that simplifies to be just y equals 6. So even further evidence there that that really is the case. All right, consider the following two equations, y plus 4x equals 6 and y minus kx plus 1 equals 0. For which value of k are the two lines perpendicular to each other? All right, so remember, perpendicular means negative reciprocal or negative flip. So I need to kind of talk about the slopes of these two lines, right? So first of all, I need to solve for y. So when I have y plus 4x equals 6, I need to take away 4x from both sides. That gives me y equals 6 minus 4x. And on the other line, I have y minus kx plus 1 equals 0. I add kx to both sides. That gives me y plus 1 equals kx. And then I take away the 1. So I get y equals kx minus 1. So here's my two equations that I'm really dealing with. Now I can really think about the slopes. So the slope of this line is going to be -4. Remember, it's the coefficient of the x term, the number in front. And watch for that negative sign. That negative is in front of that 4. That means the slope of this line, to be perpendicular, needs to be positive 1/4. Well, the number in front here, k, needs to be equal to 1/4 for that to happen. So that tells me the value of k that makes these two lines perpendicular to each other. So answer choice E for number 6 is correct. K needs to equal 1/4 for that to happen. All right, find the slope of the line between 0, -12, and 4, 3. All right, pretty standard problem here. We're going to do the slope is equal to y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. y2 is 3, y1 is 12. Notice how I'm subtracting a negative. I'll need to change that to a positive here in just a second. x2 minus x1. So we get 3 plus 12 over 4, which is 15 over 4. 15 over 4, again, if you're not sure how to actually do that, just do it on here. You get 3.75. All right, so answer choice A is correct. Now let's say they had that number as a fraction. Well, then 15/4 would be your answer. But what if they wanted you to write that as a mixed number, okay? Remember, you can always go to alpha y equals, and change it to a fraction first, okay? So we're going to do 3.75 as a fraction. So we're going to say math, enter, enter. That will turn it into that 15/4. And then alpha y equals, down here, number 3, switches it to a mixed number, which would be 3 3/4. So just be aware, in case that were to come up, it's totally possible to do that. All right, good. All right, what is the equation of a line that is perpendicular to y equals 3x plus 21 and goes through the point 9, 3? All right, so equation of a line perpendicular to this. So when we write this line, 3x plus 21, the slope is 3. So we're talking about perpendicular slope, so we need to do -1/3. This is the slope that we're going to use, okay? And it has to go through this 0.93, so we're just going to use either y equals mx plus b, or we're going to use y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. All right, let's try y equals mx plus b first. Remember, we're going to solve for b, and then we write the equation. In the other form, we just basically solve for y and we're done. So let's see here. Y value is 3. Remember, we're getting that from here, where y is 3. That's our y coordinate. Equals m, which is negative 1/3 times the x coordinate of 9 plus b. All right, negative 1/3 times 9 is actually negative 3. And then when I solve for b, I'm going to add 3 to both sides, and I'm going to get b is equal to 6. Then I write the equation, y equals negative 1/3 x plus 6. There's my equation, okay? Of course, that is going to be answer choice number B, or letter B, but let me just work through this one real quick as well. Y minus the y value equals the slope times x minus the x value. When you distribute here, you get negative 1/3 x plus 3, and then when you add 3 to both sides, that's where that 6 pops in. And there's your equation. Okay, so again, answer choice B is correct. All right, triangle XYZ is graphed in the XY plane below. The triangle is reflected across the y-axis, then it is reflected across the line y equals x. What is the location of y double prime? All right, so remember y double prime just means the location after the second reflection happens. So we're focusing in on y. We actually don't care about x or z here. It's just asking us a question about y. So we've got this original point, and then when we reflect across the y-axis, remember what happens is we switch the switch the x number only. So we switch the sign so that that's wrong. So that this 6 becomes a negative 6 and the 1 stays the same. All we do is flip the sign on the x coordinate. This is the location when you flip across the y-axis. And just look at the picture. When you take this coordinate here and you flip it across, that coordinate is going to be negative 6, 1. I mean, that makes sense visually when you look at it. Okay, then we're going to take that point and we're going to reflect across y equals x. And that's the one where x and y goes to y and x. All you do is you take the numbers of x and y and you switch their location. You flip them around to where the y number comes first. So we're going to take this negative 6, 1, and we're going to rewrite it as 1, negative 6. We don't change the signs, just switch the location. And that's it. That's going to be our location. So 1, negative 6, answer is choice C, so C is correct. All right, line segment RT has a midpoint of negative 3, 4. Point R is located at the point 0, negative 1. Find the coordinates of point T. All right, so we've got this line segment RT, and it's got a midpoint, and it says the midpoint is located at negative 3, 4, and that point R is at 0, negative 1. Now, if I'm smart about this, I could probably graph this a little bit better. 0, negative 1 is right here. This is R. Negative 3, 4 is right here. This is the midpoint. We call it M for now. And so basically, where is T going to be? Okay, couple things. Whatever I go up and over here, I should repeat and go up and over here to find T. So it looks like from R to T, I went up 5, and then I went left 3. So if I just repeat that, up 5, left 3, I'm going to find the location. So if I go up 5 from a height of 4, I will get to be at 9. And if I go left 3 of negative 3, that's going to put me at negative 6. So I can kind of graph this thing graphically and see what's happening, and that works fine. Okay. Alternately, I can use the equation that says the midpoint is equal to x1 plus x2 cut in half, and then y1 plus y2 cut in half. Okay, so we know that the midpoint, its actual location is negative 3 and 4, which means that x1 plus x2 over 2 should equal negative 3, and y1 plus y2 divided by 2 should equal 4. And then we fill in what we know. We know the point x and y for point R. So we know this is 0, right? And we know this is negative 1. So we just solve those equations, right? Multiply both sides by 2, that gets rid of the denominator. It says negative x is equal to x2. There's my x value, x2. Over here, I multiply by 2 to get rid of the denominator. That makes an 8, equaling the 2's cancel and leaves you with negative 1 plus y2. If I add 1 to both sides, I get 9. y2 is equal to 9. And again, that's what I get here. y2 is equal to 9. and x2 is equal to -6. That's where I get that from. So I know that answer choice C is correct, -6,9, and that's the answer. All right, a line has slope of 5/3. One point is on the line -3y, and another is 6/8. What is y? All right, so remember the slope is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And that's where I would start in this problem. And it just talks about slope, and it's given us 2 points and the slope, so I would just start there. Now it says that m is 5/3, and what do they say y2 is? That's 8 minus y1 is y, divided by x2, which is 6, minus a -3. So we end up adding a 3. So this looks like we're just trying to find the value of y. So I would simplify this first. So I would say 5/3 is 8 minus y divided by 9. And then I would cross multiply. Okay, when you have a fraction equal to a fraction, you just cross multiply. 5 times 9 is 45. 3 times 8 minus y, this is a group, so you have to distribute here. You're going to get 3 times 8 is 24, and 3 times -y is -3y. So don't forget the equal sign comes right down here. The left side equals the right side, and then you just solve for y. So I'm going to subtract 24 from both sides. That's going to give me 21 equal to -3y. When I divide by -3, I get 7, but because it's a positive divided by a negative, I get -7 equals y. And that's my answer. Y is equal to -7. So answer choice A is correct. The endpoints of a line segment AB are 2, 0, and -2, 6. Find the length of AB. All right, so we know the endpoints here are at 2, 0 and at -2, 6. Now my drawing is not correct at all, but I mean, I suppose it wouldn't take too much time to actually make it look right. 2 zeros here, -2, 6 is here. There we go. So A, B, we want to know the distance here. So since it's a diagonal, we're going to have to use Pythagorean theorem, or we can use the distance formula. Well, I'll just try Pythagorean theorem here. From 2 to -2, that's a distance of 4. From 0 to 6, that's a distance of 6, right? I'm using the x coordinates and the y coordinates. So really, it's 4 squared plus 6 squared equals the distance squared, or c squared in Pythagorean theorem case. So we get 16 plus 36 is equal to the distance squared. We get 52 is equal to the distance squared. When I square root that, I get that the distance is equal to the square root of 52, because the square and the root cancel there. Now, of course, you won't see that answer in your answer sheet here, A, B, C, D, and E. None of those look the same. We have to break it down into factors. So it's really the square root of 2 times the square root of 26. Square root of 26 is the square root of 2 times the square root of 13. So this is the prime factorization. So we realize that root 2 times root 2 times root 13, these two roots combine to make a whole number, and we get 2 root 13. Okay, so answer choice A is correct. Now, alternately, really, distance formula does the same thing, and you'll see this looks exactly like the distance formula. It's the square root of the difference in the x numbers squared plus the difference in the y numbers squared. Okay, well, x2 is -2 minus 2, that's the other x value, plus 6 minus 0 squared. I get 4, -4 squared plus 6 squared, all rooted. And then that really does simplify basically to this minus the square root sign. So you get 16 plus 36 square rooted, which is exactly what you get here when you get square root of 52, which of course simplifies to be the same thing. So either use the distance formula or just realize it's Pythagorean theorem, draw a little picture, think about counting how far over and up. That's your A and your B. Your C will be your distance here. And that's pretty easy to do. All right, what is the equation of the line that has a y-intercept of -2 and goes through the point 0, -12? First of all, 0, -2 corresponds to the y-intercept of -2. And it goes to this other point, 0, -12. Now, I have 2 points here. I could definitely find the slope, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Once I know the slope and I have a coordinate like 0, -2, that's an x and a y, I could use y equals mx plus b, find b, and then write the equation. Or I could do y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1, plug in x, y, and m, and then solve for y, and I've got my equation. Easy, 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 okay? But I noticed something very particular about this problem. Both of the x values are the same. So when I graph these, 0, -2 is here, and 0, 12 is way up here. That's just a vertical line. So this problem is even easier than that. A vertical line, remember vertex is the way you remember that x equals a number is a vertical line. It's just x equals a number. Well, what do all these have in common? This is 0, 0, this is 0, 2, this is 0, 12. Well, the x numbers are 0. That's the pattern. And the equations are just patterns. So x equals 0 is my equation. So answer choice E is correct. And remember, you could have gone through this the long way and done all those steps. It would have totally come out the same. But things get a little weird because the y goes away, and so it's like, whoa. But anyway, totally doable. But again, look for those x's being the same or the y's being the same, and realize it's just horizontal or vertical. That can definitely happen. All right, if triangle ABC has coordinates A, 0, 0, B, 3, 4, and C, -6, 2, and is dilated by a scale factor of -1/2, what will the coordinates of B prime? All right, so B is at 3, 4. And remember, dilation is easy. All we do is multiply each coordinate by that scale factor. So I'm going to do 3 times -1/2, which is -3/2. Of course, none of my answers are in fractions, so I'm actually going to reduce that to a decimal. And then my y coordinate is just 4 times -1/2. Well, 4/2 is 2, and 2 times -1 is -2. So that's it. Easy, easy. Scale factor can be really easy. If you give them coordinates and a scale factor, just multiply. All right, the distance between 2 points is 13 units. The 2 points are x5 and -12, 0. What is the largest possible value of x? All right, talking about distance here, I go straight to distance formula, right? X2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared, all square rooted, that's the distance. So plug in what you know. They tell us the distance is 13, so we plug that in. Okay, we've got a big square root sign. X2 is -12 minus x, that's our first x value, squared, plus y2 minus y1. Y2 is 0, minus y1 is 5. And square that. Okay, so we get 13 is equal to the square root of -12 minus x squared, plus -5 squared is 25, all square rooted. There we go. Sorry, I forgot my parentheses. Okay, so first thing I would do is just get rid of the square root. So just square both sides. Roots and squares cancel, and we're left with 13 squared is 169 equals -12 minus x squared plus 25. Well, I can subtract 25 from both sides. Okay, that gives me 144 is equal to -12 minus x squared. Well, how do I get rid of that square root? I just square both sides. Square root, square root. And here's the part you got to remember. The square root of 144 is 12. I bet most people remember that. Okay, I remember my root and my square cancel there. But also, the more important part, I'm going to put a double star, is that the square root of 144 is also -12. You get two numbers when you square root a number. You get positive and negative. Because -12 squared is still 144, just like 12 squared is 144. Okay, this is where we get those two solutions. So when I solve for x, I'm going to add 12 to both sides. I get -x equals 24. When I divide by -1, I get -24, because it just switches the sign. Here's my first x value. I'm going to add 12 here, add 12 here. I'm going to get -x equals 0. When I divide by -1, I get 0. So I have two values here, 0 and -24. The question says, what's the largest possible value? So I remember that negatives are always smaller than 0. So actually 0 is bigger. It is the largest value of x that we can find. Okay, now this is a great example for when you could use guess and check, right? You could plug in numbers for x here and see which ones work. Really, you'd be plugging it in right here. You'd take this thing in your calculator, you plug in 24. I'm going to actually show you how to do this. We want to make it equal to 13. See how the left side's 13? We want the right side to be 13. So here's what I do. I do square root of -12 minus a number, which first number is a -24. Okay, and then we square that. I'm just writing down the formula here, plus we get -5 squared. I'm just going to simplify that like that. Okay, so just looking back, you see what we've done? We've taken -12 minus whatever x is, and x happens to be a negative number, squared plus da da da. We want to get 13. Okay, so when I hit enter here, all right, when I hit enter here, I get 13. So that means -24 is a solution. Now we're saying largest possible solution, so that's where it gets a little weird. We have to double check our answer with all the other answers, because it could be any of these, right? So we go back, what was my other selection? -12. So I go back here and I change this to a -12. And when I hit enter, I realize that the distance is 5, which is not, it's supposed to be 13, right? 13 equals, the distance is 13. So the right side should equal 13. We go back through, we just keep testing. Remember, go back up here and hit enter, and then count back. And this is gonna just be 0. So I have to carefully choose delete instead of, so 0 works. Use delete instead of clear. Clear will clear the whole thing. We don't want that. And then I'm going to go back, of course, and try my other ones, but none of them will work. Now here, you notice how there's not enough space to write the number 12. I have to do insert. So second delete is insert, and I insert a number, and now I've got room for this 12. Okay, I guess I need to stop at the delete with, I'll hit delete to get rid of that. Now it looks right, and the distance is 24, so that's not right. So I just go back through and test all my answers and realize 0 is the biggest one that works. Now actually the best strategy here would have been to start with 24 and work your way down, because it goes from largest to smallest. So as soon as you find one that works, that's your one that you know works. So really that would have been my best strategy, was to start with the big number, work your way down. When it says what's the largest possible value and you're going to guess and check, start with the largest and work your way down. All right, what is the equation of a line that passes through 4, -1 and 3, 2? All right, first off, I could guess and check here. I could plug in x and y for 4, -1. I could plug in x and y into here, and I could plug in x and y into here, and whichever one has both points on the line is my answer. That's not hard. I can take A, 4 times x minus y, right? I'm choosing my x and my y here. I get 16 plus 1, and that's supposed to equal 4, which it doesn't. So it's not answer choice A. So you see how I can sort of eliminate choices by just plugging them in? That's a great way to solve this problem, okay? Now the other way, of course, is to actually do the process here. So find the slope first. Remember, that's always your first step. So y2 minus y1. Notice y2 is 2 and y1 is -1, but since I'm subtracting that negative, I end up adding. Divided by 3 minus 4. So I get 3 over -1. So the slope is going to be -3, okay? So right now I need to find b. So I have -3x plus b. I plug in my x and my y. I go ahead and plug in x equals 3. So -3 times 3 equals y is 2 plus b. I get -9 plus b equals 2. When I add the 9, I get b equals 11. So there's my equation. Y equals -3x plus 11. But then, of course, all my answers are in standard form, so I add my 3x over, and I get 3x plus y equals 11. So answer choice B is correct. But again, remember, guess and check would work just fine. All right, 17 says, what is the midpoint of the coordinates 3ab and 5a -3b? All right, do not be freaked out by problems like this. They do this all the time. They put variables where there should normally be numbers, but you do it the same way. Okay, write out the formula. The midpoint is the sum of the two x numbers divided by 2. So it's the average of the x's. And it's the same thing with the y's. You find the average of the y's. Well, how do you find the average? You add them up, divide by the number. So 5a plus 3a divided by 2. And then b plus a -3b divided by 2. Okay? 5a and 3a make 8a. When you divide by 2, you get 4a. And then right here, this is 1 minus 3. That's -2b divided by 2. The 2's cancel, and you're left with -b. So that's it, 4a, -b. That is the midpoint of those two coordinates. Now, alternately, you could pick a value for a and b. You could say, well, what if a was 1 and b was 2, right? That would mean this is 3, 2, and this is 5 times 1 is 5, negative 3 times 2 is negative 6. But what's the average of those two? Well, it's 8 divided by 2, and then negative 4 divided by 2, which is 4, negative 2. So which one makes 4, negative 2 when you use a equals 1 and b equals 2? Well, you can see that c is going to be 4 times 1, comma, negative 2, and that is 4, negative 2. It works out. Now, there might be more than one that works out. You might have to choose another a and a different b, but that strategy works. That's one of those first strategies we learned, was the pick a number strategy. All right, if the slope of the line that goes through the point C, negative 2, and negative 3, 2c is 1/4, then what's the value of c? All right, just like the last problem, it's got variables where we're not used to seeing variables, but you don't change it, okay? The slope formula is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, okay? The slope is 1/4, so we replace that with 1/4. The y2, that's right here, that's 2c minus negative 2, which makes a positive 2 when we subtract the negative, divided by x2, which is negative 3, minus x1, which is c. There's our equation. Fraction equal to fraction, we cross multiply. 1 times negative 3 plus or minus c is negative 3 minus c. Product of 4 times this group, remember it's a group, so we distribute. It's going to be 8c plus 8. Okay, make sure you distribute there. When I solve for c, I add c to both sides. I get negative 3 is equal to 9c plus 8. And I take away 8 from both sides. I get 9c equals negative 11. When I divide out the 9, I solve for c, I get negative 11 ninths. All right, and that is answer choice E, negative 11 ninths. All right, what is the equation of a line parallel to 5x minus 3y equals 12 and goes through negative 3, 6? All right, parallel, that means I have to know the slope of this line, and that is not anything I can do right immediately. I need to solve for y. So I'm going to subtract 5x from both sides of that equation. That's going to cancel the 5x there and leave me with negative 3y equals 12 minus 5x. Then I divide out the negative 3. Now remember, I do it to both sides, and when I do that, I can actually separate it to both parts. So basically, I divide everything by negative 3. All right, that's going to give me y equals negative 4, although I don't really care about that. I'm just worried about the slope. Negative 5 divided by negative 3x, remember those change signs to make a positive. So I'm going to just clean this up here for you. Really, it's just going to be 5/3. So plus 5/3 x. So parallel means I steal the slope, same slope. So the slope I'm going to use is also going to be 5/3. And it goes through this point, negative 3, 6. So I can use y equals mx plus b, or I can use y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. Either way. Let's try it the first way. M is 5/3, so we plug in our y value of 6 equals m, which is 5/3, times our x value, which is negative 3. Again, we're just using this point here. Plus b, we'll solve for b. The 3's cancel and leave a minus 1 behind. So negative 5 plus b equals 6. When I add 5 to both sides, I get that b is equal to 11. Okay? Then I write out the formula. So y equals, my slope is 5/3 x plus 11. Now when I do this over here, I should get the same thing. Y minus the y value, which again, the y value is 6, equals the slope 5/3 times x minus a negative 3, which flips it to a positive. I distribute here. I get 5/3 x. 5 times 3 is 15, so 15/3 reduces to 5. And then I have my y minus 6. When I add the 6 over, I get that 11, just like in the other one. I'm back to this equation here, okay? Y equals 5/3 x plus 11. Now that is not what I see as my answer choices. These look like they're in general form. So what I got to do is get rid of the third. So I multiply everything by 3. That's going to get rid of that third. So that leaves me with 3y equals 5x plus 33, right? When I multiply that 3 in here, it cancels out with the 3, okay? Leaves just the 5. Now that's getting closer. Problem is I need all my x's on one side. X and y's and numbers on the same side. Actually, the fastest way to do it would be just to move over this 3y using negative 3y. So I'm going to subtract 3y. Sorry, I'm going to have to write this over here and run it over. 3y is equal to 5x plus 33. All right, so if I subtract 3y from both sides, remember 3y minus 3y is 0, and then 3y does not match anything here, so I just have to write it. But that's it. That's my general form. 5x minus 3y plus 33. 5x minus 3y plus 33 is answer choice B. Okay, so there you go. That's number 19 for you. All right, a triangle with coordinates A 90, B negative 30, and C 43 is rotated around the origin 270 degrees clockwise. What is the location of C prime? All right, so C prime, I don't care about A or B. I'm really just focusing on C, which is 4, 3. I have two choices, 270 degrees clockwise, which is really 90 degrees clockwise times 3. So I want to do it 3 times. Remember, clockwise, you flip the numbers, switch the second one. Okay, so a 90 degrees clockwise rotation would take 4, 3, and change it to 3, negative 4, right? Flip the numbers and then switch the second number. So then if I did it again, that would make it 180 degrees clockwise rotation. I switch this to be negative 4, 3, right? I switch my x and my y, and then I change the value of the second number. So that's 180 degrees. If I do it one more time, I will have my answer, negative 3, negative 4, although I switch the sign of my second number, and that's my answer here, negative 3, 4. All right, so answer choice A is correct. Now, ultimately, what I would do here, which would be a little bit faster, would be to realize that if I take something and I rotate it 1, 2, 3 times around, I could have just gone the other direction, 190-degree rotation. So really, it should be equivalent as a 90 degrees counterclockwise, okay? Now remember, sorry about that, remember how that works is you take the two numbers and you still switch them, but then you change the value of the first number instead of the second. Remember, a clock has seconds on it, so you change the second. So when I do a, when I do a 90-degree counterclockwise, I take my number 4, 3, switch the 3 and the 4, and then I switch the value of my first number, and I get the same thing. So that's obviously the fastest way to do it, is to realize that relationship. Okay? All right, that's all I got for you today. Appreciate you being here, and we will see you next week.